Hello all, I'm Kel Kidman and welcome to Breaking on the Daily, where today we begin with the official, this is on the Daily Mail, the official data is exaggerating the risk of COVID and talk of a second wave is misleading. 500 academics tell Boris Johnson in open letter attacking lockdowns. This is pretty good, this is good news. We're going to start off with a lot of good news from COVID today, where we have the scientists and people talking about how the data is exaggerated in the UK. And this goes all over the place. They also talk about how lockdowns are more detrimental than they are helpful, which is all accurate, all good stuff. And, it's it's funny because this comes out almost directly after the election. And this isn't even the only thing we have with regard to good COVID news coming right after the presidential election. We also have I can't pronounce the name of this vaccine company, but a vaccine company that has a strange name says that their vaccine may be 90% effective and plans to apply for emergency use by the end of November. This is the results of Project Warp Speed, as far as I understand, and it seems as though the COVID thing is going to be over in the next few months, probably in the next month or two, actually. There's been, if you've noticed over the past few days, with the sort of huge crowds and things in the streets and protests and all that, there hasn't been a whole lot of information about, super spreader events and whatnot. Not a lot of stories on that front, and you're seeing that a lot more. It's fairly clear at this point that COVID is essentially over, but that doesn't stop my stupid governor from putting out statewide mask mandate and other COVID restrictions today, 3 hours ago. May I apologize for that? I voted against his lackey in the primary. I didn't vote against the guy in the election, mostly because I didn't want the incredibly stupid Democratic candidate to show up. So it was entirely tactical. But man, both him and his lieutenant governor are rhinos. I think his lieutenant governor is now probably governor-elect. I haven't actually looked at that election, but man, it's so annoying. I mean, a lot of this is extremely ineffective because essentially the mask mandate is him saying, you should wear a mask. I'm not going to enforce it. There are no, penalties or anything, but you should wear a mask. It's mandated. I'm not going to follow this mandate, mostly because it's not a mandate and they have no way of enforcing it. I'm just not going to be belligerent about it either, which, by the way, is the secret to not being, kicked out of Walmart or anything like that. I've literally never worn a mask anywhere except for, work. I only wear a mask if I get paid, essentially. But yeah, there's no economic restrictions or anything like that, so it's not terrible, but man, just stop. I mean, stop signaling like this. This sort of thing is getting annoying, and man, this is not a good day for Utah politicians. Mitt Romney, another person I need to continually apologize for the existence for, says that America should get behind Joe Biden on CNN. This is so annoying. I mean, this isn't even the only example of him saying this sort of crap. Yesterday on Chris Wallace, he was talking about how we shouldn't allege voter fraud, which is the most ridiculous thing I could possibly imagine, because it's pretty clear that there's something going on. It's all screwy. I mean, we're not just talking about examples of direct fraud like backdating ballots or other such things we found, clerical errors, software glitches, and all that sort of stuff in Michigan. I mean, all of the sort of things that were screwy about the Arizona election and all that sort of stuff. I'm not even talking about that sort of thing. Statistics themselves have revealed themselves to be kind of counter to the narrative that Joe Biden's win was fair and square. You see, there was this sort of there's a mathematical law that was actually a statistical law that says, essentially, people have a tendency to do particular things, and you expect this sort of thing to show up in all sorts of graphs and things, like financial graphs and all these sorts of things, where it's just like a mathematical law. It's strange. I don't entirely understand it. I haven't looked into it as much as I probably should have, but it's used in sort of financial statements to show fraud in financial statements. It's used to show fraud in elections in other places like Iran. And man, if you've seen the data for some of the screwy, the counties and states that we already thought were screwy, they are extremely screwy for Joe Biden. Every other candidate is within the margin of like, okay, reasonableness. But Joe Biden doesn't even follow the path that you would expect. There are so many statistical things that just show that Joe Biden, they're all nonsense. You have things like the ballots having only Joe Biden and nothing else, which is statistically unlikely. All these sorts of things, which are not direct evidence in themselves, but are evidence that an investigation should happen. But these people continue to try and state that we shouldn't allege these things, which is what these things are, even with all of the evidence, either statistical or direct with regards to audio recordings released by Project Veritas, or video recordings released by Project Veritas and Fleckis and other types of people. Even with all that, it's still technically alleged. But the reason that they say we should not allege this stuff is that he couches it in all this rhetoric of the Constitution, our norms, our democracy. He tries to make it seem as though alleging the system is corrupt is in fact a repudiation of the system itself, or it is somehow harming the system to say this is corrupt right now. And you see this all over the place. You want to know how you know someone's a rhino? You know someone's a rhino when they care more about the optics, how something looks, the decorum, pomp, and circumstance of the thing, of the system we have, rather than the actual rules and what is actually happening in the political system we have currently. You see this all over the place with regard to things like the courts, with regard to things like the presidency, the legislator, all these sorts of things where we talk and talk and talk and talk and talk about all this sort of decorum, the State of the Union, oh, we shouldn't impeach justices because it would make them look political, all this sort of thing, because they want to pretend that things aren't the way they are. All of this leads back to a fundamental problem in that we pretend in all of these sorts of ways that nothing's wrong, there's no problems going on. The most prolific one of these, I would say, is the court, because it even catches people who are not rhinos, with lots of people saying we should not politicize the court. No, we shouldn't put up people who are going to do our political whim because, well, you know, that would make the court more political. That would make it political. The problem is that the court is political currently. Breyer, Sotomayor, Kagan, these three go with their political whim almost entirely. They don't even really pretend to have a sort of unbiased view of the Constitution. They just go along with whatever the left wants. And with regard to Roberts, who claims to be defending the honor of the court by denying certain parts of the Constitution or changing law or that sort of thing, he claims to not be political, but is in fact being political by attempting, because his motivation is not actually to defend the honor of the court, because if that were the case, he would be going along with the Constitution. He would be a constitutionalist. No, rather, what he wants is to defend his own power. That's what Roberts wants. And you have this sort of thing all over the place. The court is, of course, just one example. Another example is, of course, elections. As we're seeing very clearly now, people are now going on to say that if you even question the election, you are destroying the democracy, which it completely ignores the idea that maybe the democracy has already been destroyed. Because the question always needs to be asked: is the democracy, is the thing you are talking about already the way you don't want it to be? Because if it is, your situation, your response should change. These sorts of we shouldn't allege fraud would be fine if there wasn't any evidence of it, or if it wasn't clear that is exactly what is going on. There is so many examples that we're going to get into, and you know, it should be telling to Mitt Romney that even George W. Bush is not even going as far as you. He said that Trump absolutely has the right to pursue legal challenges over the election, as opposed to Mitt Romney, who says that he shouldn't even allege fraud. It's completely ridiculous. All of this sort of stuff. I mean, and we have, of course, more and more examples of voter fraud piling up, by the way, without an official investigation. And all of this, we see the moving of the goalpost all the time, where most people on the right are trying to do right now is not actually prove fraud entirely. Because, to be frank, none of us can do it. We don't have the sort of resources or investigative capabilities necessary to actually have a proper investigation into fraud. We couldn't know if it was there or not. Now, we know that there are specific examples of fraud that we have seen, that we have videotapes of, that we have whistleblowers about, but we don't actually know how widespread it is because we don't have the investigative capabilities to actually investigate that sort of thing. All the conservatives are calling for at this point is an investigation, is a court case. That's all. But the Democrats, the people on the left, are still refusing it. People are claiming the evidence isn't fully there yet. There's not enough evidence to say that there is widespread voter fraud. Yeah, of course there isn't. There hasn't been an investigation. But there's enough there to say that that an investigation should be had. And I think that's all for our election fraud news, and almost the end for our news stories. But I'm going to leave you off with a bit of a fun story. Rep. Paul Gosar, a U.S. House candidate, and I think U.S. House-elect now of Arizona, has won his election with 69.69% of the votes. Nice. Now, that's where I'm going to leave you here. This has been Breaking on the Daily. Subscribe for more. I'm Kel Kidman, and I'm